Hey, what's going on YouTube? Welcome to my Final Fantasy 15 review, where I will be giving you guys my opinion on the game to give you some insight as to whether or not you should buy the game or not. Or maybe you just want to hear me talk. That's okay too. Before I go into my review, know that I am a big Final Fantasy and Square Enix fan. I've been playing their games back since they were called Squaresoft and owned most of their JRPG titles. So you know right off the bat, they're gonna get some huge brownie points. But I will try to remain as unbiased as possible, I guess. I did my best to avoid all possible story spoilers, so rest easy and know that this review will not ruin any surprises that may, or may not, occur in the game. So the big question is, did Square deliver with Final Fantasy 15? Was it made well for returning Final Fantasy players? And was it made well for players who have not experienced Final Fantasy in the slightest? Let's talk Final Fantasy 15. Within the first 5 minutes of the game, you see the most amazing cinematic with the most gorgeous graphics. I haven't seen something like this in a while. Right off the bat, you know Square means business with this game, and they plan on hooking every player to ever laid eyes on it. Final Fantasy has some really epic cutscenes that got me into the game. Some were action-packed with amazing effects, and others were more emotional, although I didn't cry at the end. Sorry, Hajime Tabata. Of course, the beautiful graphics aren't just limited to the cutscenes. The world is massive, and also really well made. The characters look damn good, the environment looks damn good, this whole freaking game looks damn good. This really helps with your immersion and brings more satisfaction to exploring the world. The last few RPGs I've played had good graphics, but they were limited with their anime-ish art style and appearance. And Final Fantasy offers a much needed change of pace in terms of graphics. The only issue I have is the lip sync isn't really that accurate in some scenes, but this rarely occurs, so I'm overlooking it. It's a rather small imperfection in an otherwise visually stunning game. The story itself is nothing new. The flow and formula they use follows the classical Final Fantasy premise. Generally speaking, the heroes have to fight a large force or entity that is evil, with the heroes having to find their resolve in order to defeat said evil. Oh, and they need to get power and get stronger, of course. I don't consider this as necessarily a bad thing. Of course, I can't speak for everyone, but if you're tired of the same Final Fantasy premise, then you'll probably end up hating the story. I feel like it's more about how we reach the end of the journey that matters, and the formula works, so don't fix what isn't broken, right? I especially like how they went back to their roots and borrowed some of the story elements from the first Final Fantasy game created. Square wanted to introduce this game to new potential Final Fantasy players, and I think it was a good nod to those who are more familiar with Final Fantasy. For those of you that don't know, the first Final Fantasy game focused on 4 warriors of light, each with a crystal. They were tasked with saving the world from darkness. While not exactly the same, Final Fantasy 15 has 4 heroes, a king of light, a crystal, and an evil that must be defeated. The protagonist and story cast are great. I loved all the characters I was introduced to, and what I really liked about the game was the bond between Noctis and his 3 companions. They were so close they could be considered brothers, with each companion supporting Noctis on his difficult road leading up to his destiny. Noctis is the main character, a kind of quiet person who has room to mature, although his immaturity can be annoying at times. Prompto is the cheerful guy who brings the happiness to the group, your classical comic relief character. Gladio is the tank and tough guy of the group, in charge of protecting Noctis. And last but not least is Ignis, the parental figure of the group. He is the most mature and calculated person, and he also cooks for everybody. The cast works really well with each other, and their time together makes for a fun and emotional journey. I really like how the cast will communicate with each other during battles and when exploring the world. It really adds to the whole brotherhood concept and their trust in each other. There are moments in the game where the character just opens up to each other, and moments like these make the game very real. Like, these guys are really human with problems, insecurities, and hopes. Story and gameplay elements like these really allow me to connect to the character, care for the character, and really hope in the end that they achieve their goals. I haven't played any games recently that contain a cast that is so closely knit together, and I really enjoyed this aspect of the story. With that said, I think they focus a little too much on the protagonist, causing them to ignore all the potential in their side characters, and even failing to develop most of the antagonists, with the exception of the Imperial Chancellor, but even that villain could have been improved on. There were a lot of side characters I liked, such as Sydney, Sid, and my 3 favorites, Arania, Briggs, and Wedge. Always like when Briggs and Wedge appear in other Final Fantasy games. The side characters were briefly introduced and then pretty much discarded. Sure, they kind of mentioned the side character's story throughout the game, but there's just so much more they can do and elaborate on. Having more chances to interact and connect with the side characters would have been a huge improvement to the story. Square also produced bonus material in the form of an anime called Brotherhood to develop the main character's background, as well as a CGI movie called Kingsglaive to develop the backstory in the main city. These extras unfortunately have to be watched if you want to know more about what's going on in the story. Square should have done more with their characters and events in-game instead of shifting it out to Brotherhood and Kingsglaive. Having these materials is also not a valid excuse for not doing more with the story in-game. I bought the game to play it, not to watch an anime and a movie to figure out what's going on. All these issues causes the story to be a big potential deal breaker for Final Fantasy fans, and causes what otherwise would have been a very good story to fall short of its full potential, leaving the player feeling kinda empty at the end. However, a good story is not all that is needed to make a great game. We also need fun and rewarding gameplay. Gameplay is obviously the largest and most time-consuming activity in the game, so there's a lot to say about this. Square is using what they call ActiveX Battle, which just pretty much means they're following what other RPGs are typically doing in this generation, which is to make battles seamless and combat happening in real time with full control of your character. While I was not against the old systems in the previous Final Fantasy games, it is definitely nice and a good decision for Square to incorporate a more modern approach to gameplay. The combat is very fun and never gets old. Boss battles were very enjoyable due to the badassness of the enemies and also because of the quick time events. I like the combat mechanics and skills Square implemented in combat. Players can perform a blindsided attack behind an enemy to deal increased damage. Players can also block certain attacks and perform a counterattack if their block and attack timings are right. And best of all, the player can perform a link attack with another party member when using a blindsided attack or a counterattack. Combined with warping, attack combos, knockdowns, and technical skills, this allows for a very interesting and diverse combat system. Combat also not only feels good, but is visually appealing as well. Enemies will have parts break off their body, which adds more realism to combat. Combat still has some issues, however. First, the summoning system is absolutely garbage due to its randomness and Noctis hogging all the experience if it does occur. Sure, there are kind of some ways to improve your chances, but it's still RNG. I want to be able to use summons whenever I want. I understand that summons are very powerful, and just being able to use them would be too overpowered, but putting a more stringent set of requirements before being able to summon a specific astral would not only have added another interesting mechanic to the combat system, but also make it so that you can actually see the astral of your choice come out once in a while. The second issue is minor, but it did bug me a lot in the beginning. Your magic has friendly fire, and it can cause yourself and your party harm. But once I learned to play around it, it didn't bother me anymore. Other than combat, exploration also plays an important role in gameplay. The first half of the game is open world, and right off the bat, there's so much of the world to explore. So many sights to take in, so many treasures to find, and so many side quests to do. I just want to reiterate a couple things that I've mentioned before because I think they're important. This game looks freaking amazing, guys, and no load times makes exploration and gameplay so much more enjoyable. There are a lot of systems that Square implemented to make exploring more rewarding. Other than fighting monsters, you can gather resources from a lot of different nodes. We have elemental, cooking ingredients, and treasure resource nodes. Noctis can also go to different fishing spots and catch fish all day if he wanted to. In addition, the day and night cycle also adds more realism to the game, with the added bonus of having high-level monsters appear at night like the Iron Golem. That was pretty scary during my low-level days. With all these systems working together, I have not gotten bored of exploring the world, and there are many more hours to be had. Like every part of the game, there are a couple of issues with gameplay. The side quests are plagued with fetch and kill quests with no real story behind them. Doing side quests should add more to the story and not just give me a few extra consumable items. Instead of lazily setting it up as such, Square should have made more side quests available from the side characters, such as from my girl Arania or Iris, and use this opportunity to allow players to learn more about them. The other issue is more of a personal preference more than an actual issue. Square made the first half of the game open world and the second half linear. I would have preferred it to be the other way around, but once I finished the story I understood why it was set up that way. I've come to terms with this and accepted it, but it was definitely not something I liked at first. So at the end of the day, did Square deliver on their promises? Is this the Final Fantasy game fans have been waiting for? And is this the game that will bring a new crowd of Final Fantasy fans in? Well, for veterans, I think this game is pretty damn good. There are definitely shortcomings with the story, and there's a lot of room for improvement. However, I do think it's passable. If you were to compare the story to that of Final Fantasy games like 6 or 7, which I know people will do, then it pales in comparison. This is also true for the original soundtrack. The original soundtrack for 15 is pretty good, but the old Final Fantasy games did it better. However, I think the new gameplay of 15 makes up for this. The modernized combat system and having full control of your characters is a breath of fresh air from the previous Final Fantasy installments. So yes, if you're a Final Fantasy fan, you should have gotten this game already. And if you haven't yet, I think chances are you'll like this game, even if you don't like it as much as the classics. For people who have never played a Final Fantasy game, but are more into regular action RPGs, I think you would still enjoy this game as well, due to the gameplay being more modernized and the setting taking place in a world that is much more relatable to our own. On a similar note, if you're thinking about getting into the Final Fantasy series, I think it's debatable whether 15 is the correct choice to start with. I personally don't think this is the best game to start with, but that's an idea for another video. I enjoyed playing Final Fantasy 15 and I'm definitely going to put more hours into this game. I think Square did a good job with Final Fantasy 15 despite their weak narrative and minor shortcomings of its gameplay. There is a lot of enjoyment to be had, and I for one will remember Final Fantasy 15 as Square's first step to bringing back the Final Fantasy we all know and love. Hey guys, if you liked this video or found it helpful, please give me a like. If you want to see more reviews or gaming videos, be sure to hit that subscribe button. Let me know what you think of the game and if you disagree with any of the points I've made. I'm actually really curious to see how well other people receive this game, although I'm only hearing good things from my friends. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you next time.